Hey everyone, I'm Truett Smith, and I am joined today by a special friend and pipe maker, Mr. Pete Prevost. He's the president of BriarWorks and Moonshine, but even before that, and still today, he's been making handmade pipes for the past 16 years now.
Going on 16.
Yeah. Welcome, Pete. Glad to have you here in person, and it's been fun to hang not at a pipe show and just get to catch up. Why don't you tell us a bit about your story as a pipe maker? Like, how does one start making pipes in your case?
Yeah, for me, I had gotten into the, just idea of like smoking a pipe like when I was 18.
Sure.
But didn't get super seriously into it. And then like fast forward several years later, I'm a musician. I was in a band and we were out on tour and started like collecting some pipes from antique stores and stuff like that. Started getting an interest in like maybe making a pipe. Actually, one of my bandmates, it was actually his idea. He was like, "Hey, we should get a pipe kit, make our own pipes." So we ended up doing that, and I just got hooked, man. I got so into like just the idea of like creating something out of this block. At the time, it was a pre-drilled pipe kit with a pre-made stem.
Sure.
And then about like I think it was like 6 or 7 pipes in that I had made from the pipe kits. I met Jody Davis, who is an incredible pipe maker, and I had known about, I'd learned about, and like totally respected him. He's also a musician, and I was
you had that connection.
I had that connection there, and so Jody was kind enough to invite me to come over to his shop and start like learning some of the basics, like how to drill my own block, how to. We didn't get into stems. That's the thing that like I think is really important. Like that Jody taught me was, he said, let's just focus on the actual pipe. Like, let's get good at that.
Right.
Take your time. Actually, like develop some skills there. You can modify like a pre-made stem, and you can make that work. But like, let's just focus on the actual pipe, and then get to the stem later. So that's what I did. Made a few pipes in his shop, and then he introduced me to Todd Johnson.
Cool.
And he and I were able to work more frequently together because Jody and I were both like touring in bands and on different schedules. And so like I started going over to Todd's and like spending time in his shop, and like just a great teacher, and like taught me so much about pipe making. And so it was really cool. And at that point, I started learning other parts like stem making. Sure. And I didn't realize at the time that like that was actually going to be one of the more difficult things to learn about the pipe. And I think a lot of people think of it as like, oh, that's the easy thing that's just kind of there. But the pipes, to me, it's kind of like totally different. Yeah. Like making a good quality stem that's comfortable and consistent, because that's the part that's like actually touching someone's mouth.
Right.
And so it's like, if they have multiples of your pipes, you don't want them to feel like all over the spectrum. Right. You want them to be as like similar as possible. But at the same time, like I like the idea of like not measuring everything. A lot of it's just about feel.
Sure.
And so like I think over time, as you make enough stems, you develop a feel for like the thickness, the width, everything, without ever taking calipers and measuring it.
But if you were to take calipers, there'd probably be a very small range.
Yeah, they probably would be very close.
Yeah.
So that's one of the skills I think about making a stem that you have to really work at and develop.
Sure.
So so that's kind of how I got to the pipe making side, and that kind of catches it up on that. But like, so then from there I just kept working at it, and going to the pipe shows. And I think it was probably about 12 or so years ago that like I started selling pipes through smoking pipes.
Yeah, nice. I was gonna say you've been with us as long as I've been here, even longer. I was thinking too, like obviously you're a musician. You talked about Jody being a musician. I'm sure there are other pipe makers that were or are musicians. Was there something similar to pipe making and making music that was a common thread that maybe captured your attention and your interest in that sense?
I think possibly. I think that there's that creative side of it that like a lot of my like friends that I've like toured with and been like in bands together with, like they're not necessarily pipe makers. I mean, I know a few other pipe makers that are musicians, but they're into like brewing their own beer or roasting their own coffee
Yeah,
or like
yeah.
all these things. Jody actually does all of those
Does all of those things,
and
yeah.
makes his own guitars too. So yeah, he's kind of next level.
He's the pinnacle of all of it.
He
Yeah,
covers all of it, but there's just something about that. Like I think, and being in a band, especially like a touring band, there's a lot of like, I guess, sort of downtime during the day, like while you're kind of waiting, to play a show or whatever. And so I think during that time, for me, it was like, oh, I could bring some of these things out on the road and maybe sit like by the bus and like, sand on this pipe or whatever. So I actually started to like work on them a little bit on the road as well. And like, yeah, I don't know, but I think there's definitely a connection there.
Yeah, and I also see a connection. There's, like you said, creative side, but there's just a technical side of it too. And I was thinking of like shaping the stummel versus stem work. Like the stummel is all creative, all just by feel, by inspiration in the moment, and then the stem is super, super technical. Yeah. And obviously the finish and stuff, the drilling is very technical as well, but similar to playing music, you've got the creative side, but then you physically, your fingers have to be doing it as well. Stylistically, you're pretty well known for smaller pipes, and often like sort of chubbier, smaller pipes, and obviously I don't think that's necessarily an intentional choice, but is there something that draws you in that direction, or tell me a little bit about the different shapes you've done?
I think some of it is that, like, personally my preference is to smoke like more delicate, smaller pipes. And so I think I just gravitate towards making things that like I would want. And so I think and I think that's a good approach. Like I actually think like that's what I should be doing. I should be like creating things that I think are, a great looking piece or desirable. If I was just trying to create something that didn't fit me at all, I felt like it would be unnatural and maybe it wouldn't work out as well. But like, it's funny because I do make a lot of more like, lightweight, smaller, delicate pipes. I also like the challenge of it because I think a lot of people think of smaller pipes as like easier. They think like, oh, it's like smaller and like whatever, and it takes less work. It's like completely the opposite. Like we've got a large pipe right here,
which is the outlier,
which is very rare. To me, like, yes, getting a nice block of wood that works out with a good sandblast, you're reliant a lot on like that with a larger pipe. And so it becomes a little bit more rare because the material has more space.
The stars have to align.
There are way more opportunities for like big flaws to show up or whatever. So like in its own right, the materials are definitely more like costly and like more, more of a rare chance of having a good pipe come out. But like you get a lot of like surface and space to work with. If you like don't like the way things are going, you can like, okay, I'm going to shape it more off this way. You got plenty of room to work with.
Whereas something like this, there's not much room to go smaller.
And some things like that are very delicate, like a long, slender like horn or something like that. That's like small and delicate. Like there's no room for error. Like if for some reason like you end up like hitting a big flaw or like you mess up the shape, like it's kind of done. And so I think I like the challenge of it. I like to push myself to, to kind of work and like under a little bit more pressure in that way. And then like with, but like sometimes I get in the mood to just say, you know what, like I want to just like make a big like giant tomato.
Yeah,
like
for this one specifically, was it the block that you saw and it was like, oh, this is really nice. I can use a lot of this block.
It kind of was actually. I remember making this one like not too long ago, and like it was definitely a nice wide block that like had like pretty solid growth rings, and I figured it was probably gonna blast. The grain didn't look great, but the growth rings on the wood looked really nice.
So you need the blast.
And I was like, oh, I should be able to get a good blast hopefully out of this. And so I just like was like, you know what? I'm not gonna make a small pipe. I'm just gonna make a large tomato here.
And it's fun. It's fun to do stuff that maybe some people don't expect and throw a surprise in every now and again.
And I do get some complaints sometimes from people that are like, I wish you'd make some larger pipes because then I might want to buy one.
Right.
And so I gotta throw them a bone every once in a while.
Sure.
try and step to that.
Like we've mentioned, besides making your own handmade pipes, you're also running production at BriarWorks, but you've also like some other artisans, designed pipes for BriarWorks, and you designed the shape that is now serially produced by the factory. Was there what was your kind of intention or thought process when choosing what shape to design for BriarWorks?
You know, there's some that are obvious, like no-brainers, like that we, will shape. I'll work on because it's like, oh yeah, well you got to have like a version of this shape or whatever. But there have been some like, that creatively, I think like are missing, or you don't see a lot in the market for like factory production pipes. And so yeah, like I definitely, stylistically, like I've designed a lot of classic shapes, but like those are more traditional. But like getting with the more like creative side that like kind of fits in with my handmade
like
stuff.
I'm thinking the original series, like your shape for the original series. What was the thought process of like, I'm gonna do this shape?
I gotcha. Yeah, so with the original series pipe, that one actually, it was moved over from Icarus, which was an old brand of ours. Okay. But to be fair, it was based directly off of a personal handmade that I owned that I would smoke. Okay. And the reason that pipe even came about, and maybe this is what got me into making like some more smaller, delicate pipes more regularly, was so on my 30th birthday, so many years ago, sadly now, Jody, he was like my favorite pipe maker. Yeah. And so my wife ended up actually talking to his wife, and we were friends, and just kind of casually mentioned like, yeah, Pete like joked about like wanting a Jody pipe, but like, but my wife's like, but yeah, like I told him like that's crazy, like I'm not buying you an expensive pipe. and then his wife was actually really cool. It was like, I bet he would totally make Pete a pipe. And like, so then actually what happened was Jody ended up giving me a pipe for my birthday. Cool. But there was a condition that I had to make him a pipe.
Fair.
And so I was like, absolutely. So I made Jody a pipe, and I cut off, a piece of the block when I made the pipe, so that like, it was going to be like a straight pipe. And so I just set this little chunk of wood aside, and so I made him the pipe. And then like at some point, like, not long after, I was like, I could make a pipe out of this little chunk of wood.
Out of the extra piece.
And I made myself this little stubby apple. And like I was like, oh, this is a rad pipe. So then like it became my daily like smoker. Like anytime I grabbed a pipe, it was that pipe.
That's cool.
And so whenever we started the company, that was actually something I didn't even throw it out there, but like Todd was like, you should like totally make that like a shape like for like the production. Yeah. And so we ended up doing that shape, that's like cool. A version of it.
And that's the first original. It's the 01, right? Yeah.
Yeah. And so and then when we changed to the original line from
Icarus,
Icarus, that's when like I brought that shape over to that line to,
that's cool.
But it's actually kind of like very similar. That's like a little bit smaller than the very first one I did, but yeah, it's definitely a similar shape for sure.
Cool. One pipe I definitely wanted to talk about was this smooth. This received your Bell grade, which is your highest grade, your highest stamp, and it's only the third one you've ever done.
Yeah.
Tell us about the Bell stamp and what it means to you, and sort of what this pipe's process was like.
Yeah. So I know every pipe maker eventually, I wouldn't say everyone, but a lot of them end up having some sort of a high grade stamp. Yeah. And whenever I first made like a pipe that I just thought was totally exceptional in terms of like, it wasn't even just the grain. No. It was like the shape. It was like a really long, delicate, like slender horn. It was one of the more difficult pipes I'd ever drilled. The shaping was like pretty cool.
It's when like the natural grain and the man-made shaping merge in this perfect confluence.
And like there was just something special to me about that pipe. And I thought, I don't have a high grade stamp, but like I feel like this needs some sort of special designation.
This is elevated above my other stuff.
And I don't even know how I came up with it, but I started thinking about my kids and their initials, and then like Bell is like the combination of their initials. And I was like, oh, that's perfect. So like I stamped it Bell, and then I put a 1 on it, and I actually numbered it. And so then I think it was like a couple years later that like I made another Bell grade, and I stamped it too. And then like I make a decent amount of smooths, but I'm pretty selective about what I want to be a smooth. I would much rather just like crank out sandblast and just like save like those like really special pieces to be smooth. And so like this one here, it was one of those ones where I'm like, I just love the way it came together. I loved how the grain lined up and like the finish and everything. So it was like kind of long overdue, I felt like, to finally like throw another bell grade out there.
I love how you stamp every bell with a number designating which bell grade it is, because that's something, like you said, a lot of pipe makers have high grade stamps. Right. I don't know anyone else who's doing the number system, at least, so that's really, really cool. And it means 15, 20, 50 years from now, someone who looks at this pipe will know this is the third one you've ever
produced. You know, it's funny. I'm glad that you bring that up, because this happens with other pipe makers, I'm sure. Hopefully I'm not the only one, but like, because some guys start out of the gate, they have like a really good system for stamping. Like they have it planned out already. They individually number every single pipe. And like, I didn't do that. Like, I started to do that. I should have kept doing it. But before I even like had a Prevost stamp, I would just like hand stamp or hand scratch basically like P1, P2. Right. And like, I think I kept that up for like the first like 20 something pipes. And then I got a stamp, and then I just stopped doing that. And I stopped numbering them. And then I like started putting the year on them. And then like I think it was like 3 years ago, I was like, man, I'm really kind of bummed that I haven't like continued numbering pipes. And so I actually started doing like the stamp, the year, and I would go ahead and stamp the number for that year for the pipe. And so I think it's kind of one of those things I haven't really talked about ever, but I think for people that are like watching this or like following me, it kind of helps them to understand the system a little bit, which has not been a great system, but I've been like kind of like trying to make it a system. And like with the bell, I think that's another thing that I was like, I'm glad that I've done that, and I've numbered them from the beginning. And it was funny though, because when I went to stamp that one, I had to do some research, because it's been so long since I had made one that I was like, okay, yeah, for sure. I only had made two. I had to like go and like research and figure it out. Yeah.
No, and I mean, that's saying something. Again, you've been doing it for just over 15 years, so one every 5 years gets a bell grade, basically at this point. So yeah, you celebrated 15 years last year, did a very small run of the first pipe shape you ever made, which was super, super cool. What do you look forward to in the next 15 years? Like, is there a direction you're kind of thinking, or is it just kind of by muscle memory at this point and just...
No, I mean, I always think I need to improve. You know, I think that hopefully like I'll continue to like develop, you know, like the quality will continue to be, you know, just as good, if not getting better. And like, you know, like with pipe makers, we all have to like pretty much make our own tools. There's not like a lot of like, so your wheels, everything. So I think I'll continue to try and like improve some of the process, tooling wise. And that might make like, you know, some improvements even on my pipes, like, you know, but honestly, like the next 15 years, like I love doing this, and like, it's one of those things that like I want to always do it forever. You know, it's like I always on some level want to be making handmade pipes. You know,
you didn't get into it because you're like, oh, this is how I'm going to provide for my family, and like this is what's going to make me rich one day. That's not. I don't think any pipe maker does it out of those reasons.
Because they're going to be really
disappointed. You also mentioned just now of a lot of pipe making isn't just making pipes, but also the tooling and machining side of it. How much of that did you know going into it, and is that a thing that you found you also enjoyed, or is it one of those necessary evils that you're like, because I love making pipes, this is something I also have to do? Or is it like, ooh, I actually like this part of the process as well?
I'll be honest, it's a necessary evil for me. I'm not like anti doing it. It's like it needs to be done, and like, but like, and I have plenty of pipe maker friends that they love doing it, and they're really good at it.
Some of them even like that, like pipe making is an excuse to tinker with tooling and stuff.
And I'm
like that.
so impressed. I'm like, that's awesome. Like, I'm kind of blown away like by the time like some of my friends put into like developing like tooling for their process. And for me, it's definitely one that's more like just a necessary thing to do.
Yeah, totally.
And I think also part of that is like between running BriarWorks and like we have our own lounge and then this, it's like it's hard, and I have a family, so it's hard for me to dedicate like as much effort as I want to into the handmade side. I make a very limited number of pipes a year.
Right.
I wish I could make more. That's something I actually, over the next 15 years, I would like to say that I'd like to increase slowly. It's just a little bit more pipes. But yeah, so the tooling side of it, I just don't have unfortunately, enough time to tinker around with new ideas with that. If it works, it works. And that's what we're going to use for this.
So we only have one pipe here that has any sort of accent on it. Unfortunately, this little billiard with the cocobolo on it. What are some of do you have any favorite accent materials that you like to work with, or anything besides briar and traditional ebonite?
It's funny, I was just looking down here and going wow, I normally wouldn't have this many just ebonite stems. And this, stem does have it's not an accent on the pipe, it's actually on the stem with the two-tone cocobolo. And then we got a couple here that are military mount, army mount
with the brass.
But typically I do mix it up. It's not just all black ebonite stems, even though that is true to me, kind of my favorite just go to stem material. It's such a good solid.
It's been
a
staple for over a century, so it makes sense.
I like to use Bakelite stems, and even for accent materials like rings and stuff, I like to use Bakelite. I love using boxwood. I've done plenty of boxwood rings, and then I think it was 2 or 3, maybe 4 years ago, I first made a boxwood stem.
Yes.
And I know you guys have sold some of those. I've done a handful of those. I don't know what inspired that. I just one day we had a good stock of boxwood, and I think I just decided, I think I want to make a wood stem, and I'm going to use boxwood. And so I did that, and definitely a lot more work, a lot more filing, and again, you got wood flaws to think about too. But I've made several now, and one of them I even kind of steamed it and slightly bent it a little bit.
No way, that's cool.
And it actually worked out okay, but just a little subtle bend.
Yeah.
I've used horn a lot. I've done some horn stems. Remember years ago for the expo, I did the horn calabash.
The horn.
Yeah. It was a calabash pipe,
right? Exactly.
With the caps. And let me think, what else? What other materials? Stem-wise, mostly a combination of Bakelite, ebonite, maybe some Juma.
Yeah, seen that.
But and then obviously boxwood or horn.
On the Bakelite note, that's kind of become, not every American pipe maker uses it, but it's certainly more dominant in the United States
for sure
artisan scene. What was your introduction to it, and maybe can you speak? What's the draw in America for stuff like that?
So for me, and I could be wrong here, but I'm definitely going to give them a lot of credit for it. I know that Bakelite was used on some old factory pipes back in the day for stem material. I've seen, I think, some maybe GBD or something. That was an old almost a pink Bakelite stem before, really random stuff. But my introduction to Bakelite as a pipe making material was Todd.
Yeah.
Todd, I didn't know any carvers that were using Bakelite.
Gotcha.
When I first started working with Todd, and he had a really good stock of it. And so at some point, he let me use some of his material and taught me how to use it. And then I think a lot of the influence that Todd's had on American pipe makers, just over time, other guys started using it.
It seeped into the consciousness.
And I definitely give Todd a lot of credit for this sort of explosion of all the U.S. carvers using Bakelite, for sure. And it is it's definitely made it very hard to get.
Yeah, I was going to ask.
It's also gotten way more expensive.
Not to give up your sources or anything, but I mean, you can't just go to your hardware store and buy Bakelite.
Yeah, and even now, it's if you hop on eBay or somewhere like that to buy rods of Bakelite, there are definitely other pipe makers also looking for it too. So it's definitely not easy to get.
Is it still being produced? Do you know, or is everything old stock?
I mean, I know everything that like I've ever gotten my hands on is definitely way old.
Like vintage stuff.
Like it's completely oxidized. It doesn't look like the same color whatsoever until you cut into it, and you're like, whoa, that rod was totally green, but it's actually gray. Okay. So you know that we don't have one here, but that gray swirl one, the outside of that rod is like a solid green color.
No way.
Yeah, and so that's pretty common with Bakelite. Is like, and I kind of love that about it.
It's like
over time it changes colors.
Oh, right.
And I love the way that like white Bakelite turns to this like creamy yellow color. I think it's so cool.
Is it different to work with than ebonite? Like I've heard it's a little bit more difficult or trickier to work with.
It's more delicate in the sense of like, you know, you can crack it easily. It can split if you are like not careful. Like, even if you like try to like put the drill bit into it like too fast, you can kind of like make it, you know, or like when you're shaping the actual stem on like the wheel or something like that, like it might actually cause it to chunk out or chip out.
Chips, I see.
But on the flip side of that, like sanding it, it's way better. It's more like working with like acrylic or like
interesting.
You know.
Okay.
And so like it goes a lot faster with the sanding process, easier to get out scratches.
Does it not dull your tools as fast?
Yeah, and
either?
So I like working with it on some parts, and other parts it's like you got to be a little more careful, but like it does seem very durable. Like, you know, like once you have a finished, you know, polished stem.
Yeah, like when we're talking brittle, we're talking about when we're putting drill bits into it, not when you're putting it in your mouth to smoke. Like you don't have to worry about it chipping off in your mouth.
And for example, I mean, I've dropped stuff that I'm working on, and like if I drop like an ebonite stem, like while I'm filing it, like it's fine. You pick it up, might have a scratch, you fix it. Yeah. Bakelite, I've dropped it before, and then like the button was gone and it broke off, so and I was like, oh.
You should never drop your pipes, but especially Bakelite, it might
be a little more careful.
It might shatter a little bit. That makes sense.
Yeah.
Do you to get a little bit technical, like do you use integrated tenons with Bakelite, or do you typically use a Delrin?
I use Delrin on pretty much all of my pipes.
Gotcha.
It's just a really good material that's really consistent. I feel like the fit. I used to turn my tenons down some, and I just found that like once they go into like a different climate or whatever, the fit just doesn't work as well. It's not as smooth.
It's more consistent than Delrin.
I feel like Delrin has like just this perfect amount of like lubricated like material with like a little bit of flex and play to it, to where it stays very consistent with the fit. The only ones that I do turn would be like on the military mount, like the tapered. So, you can pull one apart there. So
that's just like pressure fitted, as it's slightly tapered, and then it fits right in.
Yeah.
Whereas a flush fit, you're doing the Delrin.
Yeah, the Delrin. I think it's a great material for that. Or like I do use stainless sometimes, like a bamboo pipe.
Sure. Yeah, that makes sense. No, that's super cool. Well, Pete, it's been a pleasure having you hang out. Also a pleasure doing this video, and we look forward to the next time.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
And also want to shout out the Muletown Pipe Show. Every spring.
Absolutely.
Do you have dates for it yet?
Actually, we're going to be doing it March. I think it's like 14th, 15th, 16th. It's that weekend, around the 15th of March, is when we're going to do it. And like for artisan carvers, it's great because, you know, it's a good opportunity to bring and showcase and sell like your own handmades. But for collectors, it's like a really cool show and a unique experience.
It's one of my favorites. You've got a great bar, a great lounge, a great hangout spot. Columbia, Tennessee, which is where you're located, is an awesome town. You're also rocking some sweet Muletown merch. So I did want to shout out. We don't have time to go into depth. Maybe that's another video where we can talk more in depth about Muletown Pipe Show. But do check out the Muletown Pipe Show, March 2025. And I'll obviously see you there. And so thanks so much, Pete, for being here. Always great to chat with you.
Yeah, you too.
See ya.